All right. Hello, and welcome back to Real Seekers. I'm your host, Dale, the Real Seeker. And today we have take two of debate on the argument for God from beauty between myself and Juan from Modern Atheism. So, hey, Juan, how are you?
Hi, what's up? Good, and
I'm
you?
good. Yeah, well, welcome back to the show. Originally, we planned to do this on your show, but then I basically cheated by pretending to have internet trouble so I could take over. But yeah, it's no, it's going to be a great debate. I just want to kind of ask you, like, what? So just to sort of start off, I did notice you did a video on beauty, and that's what prompted me to ask about it. But I'm just kind of curious, what's your general take on arguments from beauty? Is that something you've paid attention to, or is it just something that's new to you?
No, it's more like a new thing to me, to be honest. I have heard of it, but I just think it's interesting because it's different from the usual kind of arguments like contingency, first cause. So that's makes it like the whole thing like interesting. But yeah, I don't know much about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, as you know, I kind of took a course as part of my master's in the philosophy of aesthetics. So I've sort of developed a kind of a unique argument, I think, because, for most people in these debates, it's either if you're an atheist, you go for aesthetic subjectivism, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, it's subjective, or if you're a Christian theist or something, you'll go for objectivism. Oh, it's obviously beauty's totally objective and stuff like that. I kind of answer in a unique way that it's both and that sort of thing. So I'm just kind of curious. I know you watched my previous show with
Yeah.
Faith Unaltered, and you asked me to stick to my presentation from that show, so I kept with that. But I'm just sort of curious. What were your thoughts when you saw that argument on the
Uh,
Faith Unaltered show?
yeah, I think it's a very interesting argument. It goes very deep into that. I've never seen someone go so deep into that argument, and I thought it was a great presentation. Like you have all these different possible explanatory paradigms for beauty, and you make the case why the theistic one is the best one out of all of them. You say all of them have weaknesses, so that's what we're going to look at today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So awesome. All right. So yeah, the plan for today is both Juan and I have sort of an opening presentation and some slides, and then we'll get into some discussion. Again, Juan asked me to do the faith and altar one, so my presentation will be kind of lengthy, but I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible, just out of respect for Juan's time and everybody
Yeah,
else.
no, you can do it how you want. I mean, I thought it was great, but you can do it however you want. Like I prepared it for that, but it's up to you.
Fair enough. Okay, so let me share my screen here. So hopefully my slides are popping up there. So yep, and all right. So arguing for God from beauty, and this is my arguing for what I call the theistic dispositional realism hypothesis. Um, okay, so how do you move the slides when you do it this way? One, oh, that way. Okay, so look, by way of introduction, all Bible believing Christians argue that God created everything, and when He did so, He created it very good. And this word in the ancient Hebrew actually means has an aspect of beauty towards it. It's very good in the sense that it's beautiful in addition to everything else. And obviously, we see that in other texts like Ecclesiastes, where it says, "For God has made everything beautiful in its time." And early Christian church fathers like Basil the Great also said, look, the world is a work of art, so that it's through the wisdom of Him who created it to be known. So beauty is something that Christians believe was created by God and ultimately comes from Him. Okay, so what is my argument? In a nutshell and premise format, I'm basically saying, look, there are certain relevant aesthetic facts or features of our world that everybody agrees to. And I think that what I call the theistic dispositional realism hypothesis is the best explanation for these features. So that's my argument in a nutshell. And now, okay, is this a sound argument or not? And first thing we need to do is look at premise number one. What are the seven relevant aesthetic features? So the first is that there are aesthetic correctness conditions, right? So our values, our aesthetic values, can be correct or erroneous, right? The serial killer who has a bunch of decapitated heads on pikes in his backyard and he goes, "Oh, that's so beautiful." He's incorrect. He's wrong, kind of thing. And same with our evaluative judgments in terms of aesthetics. They can be true or false. It can be true that the Mona Lisa is beautiful, or it's false that the Mona Lisa is beautiful. Secondly, aesthetic value disagreements exist, right? So clearly in this world, people disagree. Is abstract art beautiful or is it horrendous, chaotic nonsense, as I would probably see it as? Um, Look, people disagree and they have these genuine value disagreements. That needs to be explained. Where does that come from? How do we account for that? Thirdly, there's aesthetic refinement. People can grow and they become more refined, right? A child's view about the beauty of classical music changes as they grow and mature. And we have things like aesthetic education, which are directly aimed to train and help people to refine their aesthetic values and judgments. Fourthly, there's aesthetic object relevance. So I say, look, an object is clearly necessary in some way to ground our aesthetic values and judgments. The properties of the object, it's the object, the sunset, the piece of music, the work of art, those are said to be beautiful, kind of thing, right? In their own right. And so the object has to play some kind of role, I would argue there. And an argument for that would be from Philip Talon. He's got several arguments in his book, but he argues that, look, if you have a simulated version of a beautiful temple or a sunset or something like that, it's not the same as the real object. Something is qualitatively missing there. Fifthly, Juan and I will agree that the aesthetic agent is needed, right? You need a conscious subject. In order to have values, it requires a valuer, someone who has the qualia or the of significance, as I call it. That's what a value is. And in terms of evaluative judgments, you requires a person, someone with a mind, right? Because propositional judgments or thoughts are thoughts in the mind of people and stuff like that. So it requires a conscious subject. 6, there's a correlation between moral values and aesthetic values. And this is a psychological correlation. So dozens of psychological studies have proven that human beings have a tendency to correlate what is beautiful versus ugly with what is good, morally good versus bad. And just an example of one such study was a study looking at human behavior, right? So when we are around ugly people, we tend to be more comfortable lying and acting sinfully. When we're around someone we perceive as being beautiful, we tend to be more honest and that sort of thing. So this is just one study proving this weird psychological correlation that human beings have. Again, a fact of our world that we need to address. Finding number 7, we have aesthetic non-deference. So this is the tendency of human beings not to want to defer to other human beings about their aesthetic values. If I think abstract art is complete rubbish, I don't care if Juan loves it and says, no, Picasso is the greatest thing that ever existed. You're a fool. No, I say I'm right. Juan's wrong. I don't want to defer to anybody else's values or judgments aesthetically. So these are the 7 features that we need to explain with an aesthetic hypothesis. And just before I get to that, so someone asks kind of another question, is saying, do you think that the laws of logic needs a rational foundation to exist? And the answer is yes. I think God is the grounding for everything that exists. And that includes not just these aesthetic facts, but also the laws of logic. He grounds our morality. God is, when it comes to values, there are 3 types of values. There's aesthetic values, what's beautiful and ugly, that's grounded in God. I'll make that argument today. There are moral values, right? That's the moral argument for God. And there's epistemic values. We value truth, not falsehoods and stuff like that. And obviously that is to do with the laws of logic. So that's all grounded in God and his values, and the laws of logic are grounded in his logical nature. So yes is the answer to that. All right. Okay, so now we come to premise 2. Now we are going to look at various explanatory aesthetic hypotheses. What are some of the attempts to try and explain these 7 features? And in order to evaluate which of them is best, I'm going to employ the best explanation inference criteria. So there's plausibility, which hypothesis best coheres with our background knowledge versus contradicts them. There's explanatory scope. That's the quantitative criterion, right? How many of those 7 facts in premise 1 does it explain? The one that explains all 7 is better than one that explains 6 or 5. Explanatory power is how well qualitatively does the explanation explain it, right? Is it forced? Is there any vagueness or ambiguity in how it can account for it? Or does it explain the feature like a perfect fit? And finally, there's less ad hoc or simplicity. How many non-evidenced assumptions does a hypothesis have to employ in order to work? So that's how we're going to be judging these theories. All right, so what are the theories? Here is the meta-aesthetic landscape. This is a slide that I got from my professor, and I thank him. This is from my master's course, showing the meta-aesthetic landscape. And you have the different positions or theories according to certain questions and how they answer them, right? So for example, is something aesthetically good? Are there correctness conditions? Is it true or false that something is beautiful or ugly? And if you answer no, okay, you would fall into one of these positions, like emotivism. Or if you answer yes, you would end up on this side, on the realist side, and so on and so forth. And just to summarize this chart, here are the 7 aesthetic hypotheses we will be looking at. So there's aesthetic emotivism, aesthetic subjectivism, which is Juan's position, aesthetic objectivism, which is the typical Christian theist position, like Sean McDowell, for example. There's aesthetic Platonism. There are several evolutionary explanations. Then there's what I call natural dispositional realism. And then finally, the hypothesis I think is the best, what I call theistic dispositional realism. So that's what I'm going to be arguing for. Just before I go on, Juan, any questions so far on what I've presented? Is it crystal clear? Does it make sense?
No, so far it's all great. And you're right. The position I'm going to defend is number 2, aesthetic subjectivism.
Awesome. So yeah, so let's get into my evaluation very quickly. Okay, so the first hypothesis is aesthetic emotivism. This is a view made famous by A.J. Ayer, the famous atheist philosopher, and it was really a byproduct of his paper on moral emotivism. He argued that our moral values and judgments are nothing but emotions. And in that same paper, he made an off-the-cuff comment that, well, it's the same with our aesthetics. Our aesthetic values are really just our emotions, right? I feel happy when I see the Mona Lisa. I feel sad when I see a piece of ugly Picasso paintings or whatever it is. I'm going to get a bunch of Picasso lovers hating me on this show, but so that's what the values are, just our emotions that we feel when we see an aesthetic object, and our valuational judgments are our expressions of those emotions. And that's really what emotivism says accounts for our values and judgments. Now, by way of assessment, I think this is a horrible position, and it really has been disqualified by all philosophers of aesthetics today. Nobody really goes for this position in the 21st century. And part of the reason it violates, well, it denies by definition that there are correctness conditions, and that violates our experience. No, when I say the Mona Lisa is beautiful or Picasso's ugly, I really mean it's true that the Mona Lisa is beautiful. And I'm arguing in a sense that, yeah, this is an objective fact. You need to agree with me or else you're wrong. We're not just saying, well, hey, I'm just reporting to you that I'm happy. No, we're asserting I'm correct about this kind of thing. Aesthetic value disagreements. If we're just expressing our emotions, why would there be any disagreements at all? Who are you to disagree with me? I'm telling you the sunset made me happy when I saw it. So I just used the word beautiful to describe my happiness. Who are you to disagree with that? Aesthetic refinement. refinement assumes that there's a goal where you're improving over time, you're developing. But what are you developing towards? If we're just reporting our emotions, the emotions of a 5-year-old child are just as valid as the emotions of a 40-year-old PhD in art history or something like that, right? Or art appreciation, whatever it is. Fourthly, it also fails because it doesn't explain the necessity for the aesthetic object, the properties of the object. It's the sunset, the object itself, that's beautiful. Well, this theory just says, no, it's all about your emotions. It doesn't matter whether the object's there or not. As long as you can feel happy, that's all that matters. All right. So just somebody makes a comment, Stingling here. Theists are broken brain, mentally malfunctioning, delusional dolts. Keep believing in your pathetic retard God. So thank you to Stinging. As we're going to see when we come to the theistic dispositional hypothesis, that I think I'll be arguing it's the opposite. But yeah, let's move on here. So any questions about emotivism before we move on, Juan, or does that make sense?
No, yeah, that's I don't think that's the correct view anyway. But yeah,
Fair enough. Okay, so now we come to Juan's position, aesthetic subjectivism. So this is another anti-realist position. So it denies that the properties or the object is necessary. Who cares about that? It doesn't matter. What grounds our values and judgment is solely the conscious subject, the aesthetic subject. Whatever he values, okay, that's beautiful. Whatever he disvalues, that's ugly. And his judgments are true to him, kind of thing. Truths are relative. So that's the difference. Subjectivism, the correctness conditions are relative to each individual. That's where we get beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So by way of assessment, I kind of gave some generous things here to help, but aesthetic correctness, so it does have an account, right? It says there are correctness conditions, but that they're relative. But I gave it a questionable status because this doesn't cohere with truth. Truth is objective. It follows the correspondence theory of truth. And so because of that, I think that this theory, by going for subjective relativism, is a very improbable position, or at the very least, there are doubts about it. Aesthetic value disagreements, again, why are there any disagreements at all? If it's true for you that Picasso's beautiful and true for me that it's ugly, we shouldn't be disagreeing. There's no explanation for how disagreements would result at all. It's all relative, whatever you think, who cares? Finally, it fails. There's no aesthetic refinement. There's no objective goal. It doesn't make sense that we develop our aesthetic tastes and stuff. It just changes from one thing to another, perhaps, kind of thing, right? The child values, like a kiddie show, and as he grows up, he appreciates more, better shows or more mature shows talking about different subjects. But that isn't a development. He's not refining his taste. He's just changing it on aesthetic subjectivism. And it denies outright that the object is necessary. And that violates everything we talk about in terms of the necessity of the object and its property. Again, we say the object is beautiful, kind of thing, right? And there's no explanation why is there this correlation, right? People that have make aesthetic judgments, that has no correlation to the moral values and that sort of thing. Why would there be this correlation at all? I don't think it explains that. All right. Okay. Now we go to the other end of the spectrum, aesthetic objectivism. So this is the traditional Christian theist position, but it actually goes back to the ancient Greeks, right? With Aristotle, for example, he went for objectivism, and there are different categories, but it basically says aesthetic values and judgments reduce solely to the properties of the object. The subject doesn't matter. The Parthenon is beautiful, even if humans never existed, that thing has the property of being beautiful. And there are different understandings of what it means to be beautiful. So there's the outdated reductionist thing, which says, well, if something has the property of symmetry or proportionality or something like that, that equals beautiful. We just use the word beautiful to describe the property of proportional. There are also non-reductionist versions. So people like Gerald Levinson say that no, there is this non-reducible property of being beautiful, and the Parthenon has it, for example, and it's an emergent property in the same way wetness emerges from two hydrogen particle elements and a one oxygen molecule coming together in a certain relationship. The property of wetness doesn't belong to any of the molecules. None of them are wet, but wetness emerges from the totality of the structure. So under this view, the property of being beautiful is an emergent property. Does that make sense as to what the objectivism holds there, Juan?
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay, all right. Okay, so here's my assessment of objectivism. And so you can see, I think it does a little bit better. It passes a lot of these things, but I think there is a questionability on the aesthetic value disagreements and the aesthetic non-deference because, well, if you're just looking at the object and the object has this property, why is it people disagree? Why can't they just see, yeah, this has the property being beautiful, stuff like that? I think objectivism can struggle with explaining why are people disagreeing on that front. But where it really fails is, again, it totally denies the need for aesthetic subjects. And remember, as I argued, a value requires a valuator, somebody who has the experience of valuing something, right? That qualia. And evaluational propositional judgments require a mind. And persons or conscious subjects are the only things that we know of that have minds. So it fails on this front. And I think it also fails in terms of explaining the aesthetic and moral value psychological correlations. Why does the property of an object cause this correlation? If it has the property of being beautiful, that would cause my aesthetic judgments, but it would have no correlation with moral judgment. So it just doesn't account for this fact at all. So yeah, that's my assessment on that. Any questions on objectivism there, Juan? Or?
No, it's all good.
Okay. I know you're going to be questioning me on subjectivism, so we'll get to that at the end. But
yeah.
Okay, now there's aesthetic Platonism. So this is a non-natural realist position. So again, it's about the properties of the aesthetic objects themselves. But in this case, it's based on the Greek philosopher Plato, who held that there was this realm of the forms up in the heavens, right? So basically the forms were abstract, perfect, eternal, unchanging concepts or ideals. These things transcend time and space. So there's the form of one, there's the form of humans and stuff like that, the form of beautiful, the form of ugliness. And aesthetic objects here on Earth, concrete objects, are said to be beautiful or ugly insofar as they have the property of participating in the beautiful form, or they're ugly if they participate in the ugly form up in the heavens. So that's what this theory states. How do I evaluate it? Well, again, not so good. Again, I'm being generous, but I think there are issues with the correctness conditions. How would you know whether something is participating in this non-evidenced ad hoc beautiful form up in the heavens and stuff like that? And I think it fails to recognize the need for the aesthetic subject. It's exactly the same as aesthetic objectivism. The subject's not needed at all. All that matters, does this object, does the sunset participate in the form of beauty or not? That's all that matters. And I think that's wrong from our experience. And it can't explain the correlation. And it fails for the same reason aesthetic objectivism does. Any questions on that one?
No, that's fine.
Okay, all right. So, so evolutionary explanations, I'll just go by quick. There are various ones, right? So for example, there's the original natural selection, or some people have updated it, the sexual selection. That was Charles Darwin's theory. But these are just aesthetic features kind of reduced down, values and judgments reduced down to the property of fitness and the ability to reproduce. If an object has leads to fitness or demonstrates the property of fitness or the ability to reproduce healthy, great offspring, that's beautiful. And that's why peacock feathers are beautiful, because, hey, it's proving I'm robust. I'm ready to have kids with you, and they're going to be strong, healthy. They're not going to be subject to genetic deformities and stuff like that. So that's what the natural selection theory is. But just note, there are other theories. There's the biophilia evolutionary hypothesis, which says it's more grounded not in fitness, but in the ability to survive based on beautiful habitat selections, right? Certain habitats are more conducive to our survival than others, and those we find beautiful versus not. Or there's the social cohesion hypothesis, which talks about the survival of communities rather than individuals. Again, for time's sake, I'm just going to focus on the first one here today. And as you can see, I think it's an utter failure. It doesn't account for the correctness conditions. It certainly doesn't account for the correlations between aesthetic and moral values. And I don't think it accounts for the aesthetic non-deference factor either. So here you can see I've got some specifics. Look, Charles Darwin himself observed that natural selection alone could not explain why many animal traits confer survival costs. So think about this. Peacock feathers actually harm its ability to survive. If you're bright and apparent to predators, you're going to get killed first ahead of dull brown animals and stuff like that that don't have beautiful feathers. So this is why even Charles Darwin himself said, natural selection, you're a fool if you think that can explain beauty. And he invented this new theory called sexual selection, which under the hypotheses above, it would be the null theory hypothesis. But yeah, so Darwin himself admits that it fails. Like I said, it can't account for the correctness conditions. Why do we value dangerous animals in environments like tigers? We see tigers as very beautiful. And even experts like the ornithologist Richard Prum, he's an expert in studying birds. He's actually proven scientifically in peer-reviewed papers that the subjective experiences of beauty are fundamental in biology. They're basic. They're not reducible to something else like fitness or something like that. No, for birds in the animal kingdom, beauty is just this basic value in its own right. So yeah, this has been proven scientifically. And finally, I would say evolutionary mechanisms are capable of producing aesthetic values. Okay, so yeah, it's not ad hoc. So that's my thing there. Any questions about that one? Or no?
No.
Okay. All right. So finally, we're getting to my theory now. So first, we're going to start with dispositional realism, or what I call natural dispositional realism. And this is a position in the philosophy of aesthetics that was advocated by philosophers like Michael Sloat in the Journal of Philosophy, probably the top journal, secular journal in philosophy. But it started with the atheist David Hume. So I just want to note that David Hume says, no, aesthetic subjectivism is wrong. Beauty is not in the eye of the beholder. Instead, he went for what he called dispositional realism. And what is that position? So that position says, look, aesthetic objects, or the properties of aesthetic objects, are necessary to ground our aesthetic values and judgments. They have what are called dispositional properties. So the objects have certain properties that cause the proper aesthetic agent or proper aesthetic subject to respond in a certain way, but to have the appropriate value and to make the appropriate judgment aesthetically, right? So the objects are necessary. They have these dispositional properties whereby a aesthetic subject, the proper aesthetic subject, is disposed to respond by valuing it or disvaluing it as ugly and making the appropriate aesthetic judgment. So this is the dispositional realism position. On a natural basis now, there's this question, well, you're talking about the proper aesthetic subject. Who is that? And what David Hume and Michael Sloat say, philosophers in secular philosophy of aesthetics say, is that, well, obviously the only agents we know of are human beings, so he's got to be human, but he has to be qualified. Qualified in what sense? Well, he's an aesthetic or an artistic expert. It's the elites. What the PhD doctor in art appreciation, what he values as being beautiful and judges to be beautiful, that is what we ought to judge as being beautiful. What he thinks is disvaluable and ugly, we ought to agree with him. So it doesn't matter about every Jim Bob Jones. Who cares what I think? I ought to defer to these artistic experts because it's their values and judgments that actually ground the proper aesthetic facts there. Okay, so what's my evaluation of natural dispositional realism? So I think it does well, although it still fails. There's still problems here because there are aesthetic value disagreements, not just among lay people versus experts, but even at the level of experts. Equally qualified art experts and aesthetic philosophers of aesthetics, they disagree with each other on what's beautiful versus ugly and stuff like that. So this theory can't explain that. According to it, we should all just agree, right? And it fails with the aesthetic non-deference. Both Juan and we're not art experts, but I feel no compulsion whereby I ought to agree with the art experts. If they think Picasso is beautiful, I'm right, they're wrong. I don't care what they say. I'm going to go with my judgment. I'm going to stick to it. I'm not going to defer to them just because they have a PhD or they've studied art history or whatever. And it also fails, art experts don't tend to be moral experts. There are philosophies of aesthetics, but they're not experts in moral philosophy. And that's the case in my own master's class with my professor. He was great in the philosophy of aesthetics, and I learned so much from him. But when it came to moral philosophy, he didn't know that much about it. He didn't know or study that area. So just because you're an expert in aesthetics doesn't make you a moral expert, and it doesn't explain why there is humans have a psychological correlation. All right, any questions on that one?
No, that's good.
All right. Okay, so now we come to my hypothesis, the theistic dispositional realism, because I think that dispositional realism is really correct in that how it grounds. It's both grounded in the subject, his values and judgments, and also in the aesthetic object itself. The object is beautiful. Its properties are necessary to cause the subject to respond in that particular way. I think that's correct, that insight. But where they err is, well, who's the proper aesthetic subject? It's not a human being. It's not the artsy fartsy expert types. No, it's God. God is the proper aesthetic subject. He's the ultimate judge. It's his values, aesthetic values, and his aesthetic judgments that we as human beings ought to reciprocate as image bearers of God. So it's his values that ground all aesthetic values and judgments in the world. And that's what I call the theistic dispositional realism hypothesis. As you can see, I think it does great. However, there is at least one area of questionability here, and that's, okay, well, let's say if we add the postulate that human beings are designed to reflect, or we ought to mimic God's values and judgments, why don't we? Why is there disagreement? That some people judge Picasso beautiful, some people judge it ugly. How is that possible? There's only one correct judgment, that's God's. And shouldn't we all reflect what God's is? He made us, after all, right? So why are there disagreements? So there are various explanations for that. So I'm providing 6 here. So here's potential responses. I don't, as a Christian theist, I may or may not adopt all of these. But so number 1, you could just say, well, aesthetic disagreements don't really exist, or at the very least, they're not as widespread as you think. So these disagreements aren't actually disagreements in value, they're disagreements on the facts or something. Or perhaps they're disagreements in the degree kind of thing. Are you getting bored there, Juan? Or I see you yawning. So I'll wrap up very quickly. But another way is no problem. Sorry, you asked me to do the full thing. So in the hierarchy, right, there are certain aesthetic features. Maybe God values originality, whereas an individual human saying, no, I value traditional faithfulness more. And so disagreements arise based on, we both value originality and traditional faithfulness, but in one case, a human being is valuing one feature more than the other, and God is valuing the other, and that leads to disagreement. Or differences in aesthetic development, right? Some people are more educated than others. Some people are more refined than others. Definitely, I think everyone would recognize that adults are more refined aesthetically than children tend to be, kind of thing. So there is some notion of development, and that could explain why there's some differences. Another thing is, well, there's intentional ambiguity in the work itself. So that with abstract art and stuff like that, the art is intended to cause differences of opinion. It's meant and designed to cause people to respond differently. So that's another answer you could give. Fifthly, maybe it's the case that God designed people to value different things differently, right? So God, as the ultimate judge, he values both broccoli and carrots, let's say, for example. But he's designed Juan to like carrots, and he's designed me to like broccoli. So that the differences are part of the design plan, but both are good. These are good for you. These are vegetables, they're edible, and you should value these and stuff like that. I know that's not beauty, but so that's another answer. And then finally, number 6, the Christian theism answered the fall. Sin entered the world through the fall, and it has corrupted all of human beings' faculties, including their aesthetic faculties, to varying degrees. And it's because of the corrupting influence of sin, corrupting our faculties and the fall of Adam and Eve. This is what could account for some or all of the aesthetic disagreements that human beings experience. And to the extent that we've diverged from the original design plan, where we ought to conform to God, sin has corrupted us as image bearers of God. And that's why sometimes we diverge from what God's values and aesthetic judgments are. So those are the 6 explanations that I think can defeat this defeater for the theistic dispositional realism hypothesis. And therefore, it is clear, since it explains all the other features, that means it's fully green. And I think it has good explanatory power, good explanatory scope. It explains all 7. The only plausibility issue would be, well, maybe someone would argue the existence of God is implausible. It doesn't fit with our background knowledge. I would beg to differ. I think there's great evidence that God exists from the ontological, cosmological, axiological, and teleological arguments and stuff like that. And there's no ad hoc assumptions incorporated in it. So therefore, I think it's the best explanation we have. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. And Juan, I will turn it over to you to present your slides.
Yeah, that was a great presentation. Thank you. So you can present them.
Okay.
I just want to show a couple of stuff real quick. So which one of these images do you think is more beautiful, the left or the right? I think everyone is going to say the right, or the right one, the one with complex one, like the marble, the one with the texture.
Yeah. Right? Are you asking me, or?
Yeah, I was asking you.
I think I prefer something rather than nothing like this. So yeah.
Yeah, that's not nothing. That's a flat color, right? But yeah, okay. Okay, so here, I think most people are going to say that the blue one is more beautiful and the yellow one is like too bright, or wouldn't you agree? Okay, now here, I think most people are going to say that the image on the left, the painting on the left, is the beautiful one, obviously. And by the way, do you know who painted that painting? It was
no.
My grandfather did that.
Okay, nice.
So yeah, he was a great painter. So the question is, why is the image on the left more beautiful than the one on the right? And I think the answer is what makes a painting beautiful in many cases is that it's more similar to reality, right? It has shadows, it has like textures. I think being similar to reality is what makes a painting beautiful, usually, when thinks about it like that. So, but here's the thing: which one of those images is more beautiful? I think the painting is obviously much more beautiful. The right one is just a photo. And this is interesting, for example, for the evolutionary explanation for beauty. The idea is that we are supposed to look at things that are beneficial to us, like food, and to perceive them as beautiful. But if that's the case, I think the real apple should be seen as more beautiful than the painting, right? Because the real apple is like more similar to something that will be beneficial for us. But this is not the case. The painting, I think, is obviously the more beautiful picture. So in some places, it's easy to say which one is more beautiful. But let's take a look at other examples. This is your favorite, one of your favorite paintings, right? So I think that the mist looks very beautiful in the mountains and the trees and all that. So, but so this is one I picked that one as my favorite painting. I don't really know if that's the best, the most beautiful painting there is, but I think it's a very beautiful painting. So here is the question, Dale: which one of us is wrong, right? Because one, there is, if you think there is an objective answer to whether something is beautiful or not, then how do you know? Okay, one of us must be wrong in saying this is the most beautiful painting. Who is wrong, right? And I want to show something here. I think is really good for. It really helps driving my point. My point is number 2. I think beauty is a subjective thing, but it's also obviously based on the object. It's both a functional and the object and the observer. And let me just talk about this poll. A poll: who's the most beautiful woman in the world, right? And you can see here the poll is very close. Like there is no one single woman that gets like or 20%, right? The results are very evenly spread. Like there is massive disagreement on who is the more beautiful woman in the world, right? So it's like how could this be the case, right? So
Yeah.
that's just what I wanted to discuss. I think this says that beauty is a subjective thing, and yeah, no, that's all I wanted to show. Really, that's my slides.
Okay. All right.
So I'm going.
Okay.
So I'm going to defend. No, I'm done. We can just talk. I'm going to defend the position number 2, aesthetic subjectivism. Right. So let me tell you what I think, how I think it works. Imagine it's like a yeah. Well, I was going to ask you to go to this, but we can do it later. Please, to go to the slides where you criticize aesthetic subjectivism, and then I can respond to the points where you think that it doesn't explain this or that.
Okay. So you want me to bring that up now?
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, we're in a second. Yeah. So I think imagine it's like our perception of it's like we both have different functions in our brain. Like you know what a function is in mathematics, right? A function looks at a variable, like there's a f function that looks at a variable, an x, and it gives a result y. In that case, the x for me will be the object. The function will be like our brain or our subjective perception of beauty. We each have a different function. You have a function and I have a different function. And the y will be like a beauty value, for example. So my brain has a function, looks at an object x, and based on the function of the brain, gives a certain beauty value. And your brain looks at the same x and gives another beauty value, a different one, because it's different functions, they are going to give different beauty values. But the x, you still need the x, right? Because the x where the function needs a variable to work, right? So that's why the objects are the beauty is also grounded in the object. in addition to being grounded in my subjective, yeah, function or properties or my preferences. Let's call them preferences, my subjective preferences. So I think that, yeah, I think that actually can explain beauty, what we mean about all the relevant facts about beauty well. So maybe we can take a look at the slide where you talk about aesthetic subjectivism. Yeah, the next one, the one, yeah. So okay, the first feature is aesthetic correctness, right? It's the idea that I mean, we can't just have an open discussion now, you know.
Sure, yeah. Yeah,
So
okay. So aesthetic correctness conditions. I give it a generous, questionable thing, but I do think it fails. Like it's implausible, given it contradicts the correspondence theory of truth in favor of subjective relativism.
why I don't see why. Look, when I say that a painting is beautiful, I am saying all I'm saying is the painting is beautiful to me. Okay, that is true. That is the proposition that is true. The painting is beautiful to me. If you say the painting is ugly, what you're actually saying, the painting is ugly to you, because it's not the exact same proposition. I mean, the proposition that is true is just that is beautiful to you or to me, right? That's all. There is.
So I don't think so. One of the major arguments against this, right, these views is a linguistic argument, and I don't think that's what we mean. I think when most human beings, when they say this sunset is beautiful, their intention behind their words is, yeah, this is objectively beautiful. Like this, again, they don't have these terms in mind, objective, so but they mean like it's true. This is actually beautiful. And if somebody were to go, no, it's not beautiful, they'd be like, what? What are you talking about? They would take issue with that. So I
Okay.
don't think that's what they mean. I think they mean it objective.
Yeah. You're right that at some level, if you like, you say I think you talk about this in other place where we're talking about a thing, whether it is beautiful or not. It's like it's obvious that there is no disagreement there. It's like when we look at a painting that is obviously beautiful, right? And another person comes and says, "No, that's not beautiful," and I'm like, at some point, like, what are you talking about? But there is a point where I do accept that, okay, maybe you have a different taste. I don't know, for example, if you take, for example, I think Van Gogh is overrated, for example. And I do admit, like, if you're looking at, if I ask you who is the most beautiful one in the world or the most beautiful painting, and your answer is different than mine, now I don't do the same. Now I agree. I think to myself, okay, I think in that point that most people will think to themselves, okay, he just has a different faith. They will not think, okay, he's factually wrong. I don't think they think that, right?
Um, okay, so it's kind of, I know I gave it a green thing here, but with what you're qualifying it, I'm still hesitant because then if what you're saying was true, like they can accept it, right? They can tolerate people who disagree and they, okay, that's just the way of the world. But if what you're saying was true, where they actually accepted that, okay, the correctness conditions are subjective, then they would be deferring to the other person. But I don't think they do that, like at least partially, right? Like they would say, well, you know what, I'm not warranted in saying that this is, objectively beautiful anymore. And now I would change my mind and defer and say, I don't know, it's beautiful to some people and it's not beautiful to others or something like that. But in their heart of hearts, they still believe, no, I'm right. That this guy disagrees with me. I accept that he disagrees with me, but his opinion's not equal to mine. Like it really is beautiful, and this guy's just wrong. But I won't. I'll be polite. I won't tell him he's wrong. That's what I think. That's at least what I do. Like when somebody, because people tell me like abstract art is beautiful, I see a bunch of slop on a paint thing, and I accept that people disagree, but I don't defer to them or respect their aesthetic judgments on that front.
Yeah, I used to have a different. I used to have a similar opinion on abstract art. Like he's right. Okay, yeah, this is going upside the point, but I think if you're going to really stare at it, right? I think you
Mhm.
want a more beautiful painting with a real human, but as a you're going to get a glimpse at it in a decoration, like in a wall, I think maybe abstract can work, like a simple. But here's the thing: I don't think. Okay, I do think that when people, there is a level. Okay, so you think the people who voted this woman as the most beautiful woman in the world, they are saying, okay, all these 80% of people who think another woman is more beautiful, they are really wrong, right? You think they think it in hearts. Okay, those people are somehow factually wrong. I am the part of the 15% of the people that got the answer right. You think that's what they think in their hearts? Where if you were to ask them these things?
So on that front, I think look, all these women and stuff like that are beautiful, right? Like God values every single one of them as beautiful in these senses. So it is objectively true that each of these women are beautiful. And okay, just individual humans, okay, I'm responding to this beautifulness. It's not like God, oh, like this woman. So if you put in Lizzo there or some, I don't know if I should name names, but let's
Yeah.
just be honest and stuff like that. Like Lizzo is not beautiful, right? She's against the design plan. She's deep. She's a beautiful from the sense of she's an image bearer of God. She's a human being, and we love and respect her and stuff like that as a person. But just from a physical standpoint, she's not beautiful. She's overweight, and people can say the same thing about me. I'm slightly overweight and stuff like that. So that's not beautiful. That's against the design plan. Human beings are designed to be fit, and that's what's beautiful, kind of thing. So yeah, let me turn it on me. Like I'm not a handsome man. That's just an objective fact and stuff like that. But yeah, like compared to stuff like that. So it's possible to say some people are ugly and stuff like that, just from a purely physical standpoint, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Sure. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to hang on one single feature too long, but yeah, I'm not sure about that. Yeah, because where what you say, for example, the example about the serial killer. I mean, at that point, I mean, you have a point, but I have to, I guess, I will bite the bullet somehow and say, yeah, maybe there's some sense where that's beautiful to him, and what happens is he's got a messed up sense of beauty. His brain is so messed up that he sees that as beautiful, so it becomes beautiful to him because his brain is so messed up, right?
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but so that's proving. I see that as saying you're proving my point and stuff, right? Like there are different kinds of beauty. Okay, so maybe one person values the sunset, another a beautiful piece of music. These are all beautiful. God values all of these things, but there is this objective standard, the correctness condition. That serial killer, he's diverged from the design plan, as you're saying, because
Yeah.
something's messed up, and that's why he's like, decapitated heads, how lovely! Yeah, this is beautiful stuff, so on the correctness conditions, I see you as kind of affirming that's theistic dispositional realism. That's not subjectivism, because subjectivism has to say no, that serial killer is correct. He's perfect. His opinions equal to ours. Those decapitated heads, ugly for me, beautiful to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay,
And
so let's.
I'll just say hi. Hey
Yeah.
Ringo, good to see you in the chat. But yeah, he's got to go.
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
So the second one, I don't get why you gave it a yellow. I mean, isn't it like one obvious green, like the one obvious green there? Like if they are subjective, then we're going to expect that there are going to be disagreements. Like subjective is naturally explains number two. Why is it yellow? I don't get it.
Well, because why would there be disagreements, right? If it's true that it's ultimately just the subjective opinion and they're all equal, why would we disagree? If what you were saying is true, it would be this kind of thing. We would just defer to them and say, yeah, that's true for you. And it's not true for me. But instead, human beings don't do that aesthetically. Whether we know, what do you mean? This is great stuff. This show, using a show, that's art as well, right? Like this movie is beautiful. The cinematography is amazing. You're wrong to think that. And
Okay, yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah, I get what you mean. You're right. Yeah. So I get the point of the kind of disagreement. Yeah. There is a point where I can the other way we tell me where you can say like the other person has bad taste, or like, yeah, like why are you like that painting? Like, don't you see this or that? Like, okay, sure, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe you're right there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's partially, mm,
And
yeah.
go ahead. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Um,
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, that's how I see your examples. Like you point to disagreements, but like these are okay. So I liked the picture. I like scenery as paintings or whatever, right? Whereas I think it was a picture of three women or something
yeah,
like that. I don't know what it was, but and you say you like that, and I like the scenery kind of thing. But both can be objectively said to be beautiful, right? Like God values both things, but
yeah,
it's not like I don't think you're disagreeing and saying no, but the painting of the scenery is ugly. You yourself said no. This is beautiful. The
yeah,
fog
yeah.
over the mountains is good, and I'm sure I would say the same about your painting about the three things. It wasn't an ugly painting or something. So
Yeah.
that's consistent with theistic. It's only it's a problem when it's like, okay, are we saying this is ugly versus beautiful?
Okay. What can I try to say about that? I think when we say that, when we say a person is obviously like wrong in this sense, we mean, okay, your opinion diverges too much from the normal, or from the, yeah. I think that's, for example, if a painting has a very bad anatomy, for example, like very bad made painting, and somebody says, I think this is beautiful. I mean, I know that it's a subjective thing, but at the same time, I'm like, what? Don't you see how bad the anatomy is and all of that? Don't you see that it diverges too much from what normally people see as beautiful in a painting? I think in that sense is that the person is wrong. But I mean, yeah, I don't know if the person is like objectively wrong in a sense. Again, I would just have to say, yeah, I mean, I don't think nobody will agree on what the most beautiful painting in the world is, right? So I mean,
Right.
is it like it's a mystery, and the opinions will be very wide, like in the woman example? Is it like what it does mean? Does it mean that 80% of the world, because the opinions are too varied and too wide? That's my point. That was my point with that poll. They are just way too varied for that to be true. What you're saying, it will imply that 80% of the world is got that wrong, right? And that's like, really, is that so difficult? What is so difficult about beauty that 80% of the people will get it wrong? It doesn't feel like that's something that 80% of the people are going to get that wrong.
Yeah, so you're kind of saying with the value disagreements, like that you're talking about like disagreements on like a contrastive judgment, right? Like they're both beautiful, cool, but which one is the most beautiful?
Yeah,
80%, 90, probably like 95% of people are going to disagree. That,
yeah,
and I would agree that's a fact of the world. So I provided various explanations. I'm just curious on if you think
yeah,
any of them might work. Where is it? Um, okay, so again, I was trying to provide various answers because this is theistic dispositional realism, not necessarily Christian
yeah,
things. So that's why I saved that for the last. But I provided some certain things, right? So I think we will agree. Number one doesn't work because there are genuine disagreements at times, right? I can find one or two people who actually disagree. Well, okay, so what do you make of the aesthetic differences in the aesthetic hierarchy? Like,
well,
maybe someone is valuing a certain feature and attributing the significance of originality or sorry, faithfulness, realistic
yeah,
representation versus ambiguity or versus symbolic representation and stuff like that. So that would explain why somebody wants the abstract art, whereas me and you were more classicists. But it's because you're valuing faithfulness,
yeah.
representational faithfulness over that, and that explains our like. Do you find that differences based on that a problem for theistic dispositional realism or
Yeah. So here is the thing. Let's say God values faithfulness, for example, right?
yeah,
So that means, so if many people value other thing over faithfulness, that just will present the question, why do so many people value the other thing, that what God doesn't value the highest, right? Like, why
Mm,
do people disagree? I mean you will need the next explanation. I know you have an explanation for that, but
yeah,
you will still need it, right? Because like, if God values one thing, like a priori, we are not looking at the other explanation yet, but just look at number two. If God values faithfulness, then originality, then people should also reflect that, right?
yeah,
That should be the case. So that doesn't really explain it. You need, I think, the next
yeah.
ones.
Yeah, I actually do agree with you on that. So that wouldn't work as a defeater then with the theistic. Again, under the notion we are built to be little aesthetic god clones, right? We're meant to be his image bearers, uh, so to speak, aesthetically at least. Okay, but I do just want to go over. Do you think these ones, first of all, what about differences in aesthetic development? Like that's
Right.
clear when it comes to
Yeah.
children.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
do you think this could solve the problem, or are there still,
Right.
even with this, there's still cases that
Right. Even with this, because I think even among people who are adults, right, or the same level of refinement, even among those people, you will find the wide disagreement. I don't think the disagreement is wide because people were asking children were the most beautiful woman in the world. That's not why that
yeah,
was wide. I think even among people of the same age group or whatever, you're still gonna get wide disagreement. So I don't think that will do a lot of work in explaining that.
okay, but it could at least do some of the work. It's a
Yeah,
partial.
maybe. Sure, yeah, sure. It may do some of the work.
Okay, and this one, obviously, in terms of what we've been talking about, the intentional ambiguity of the work. So let's say God values both equally. For all I know, God values abstract art, perhaps, kind of thing, and it's just okay. It's the ambiguity of the work is designed to create differences within different humans. That's just how the artist designed his work to be, to elicit differing values and judgments about it.
Right, but I don't think most art things are going to be ambiguous. I think some may be ambiguous, but I think most will not are not like designed to be ambiguous. I think only a small fraction of the artworks are going to be like ambiguous on purpose, right? So I
Yeah,
don't think this does like a lot.
gotcha. Okay, yeah, and I think I would agree. Again, this could provide perhaps a partial thing, but it
Yeah,
again, like when you come to examples of like me or Juan just saying abstract art, again, there are exceptions to this kind of thing, but for the most part, it just looks like nonsensical mess to me, and that's not beautiful in my opinion. Um, Perhaps we're wrong on that kind of thing, right? So that in those cases, kind of thing, I wouldn't explain it. So that's where I
yeah,
think you really come to number 5 and 6,
right.
where you involve God in the explanation, right? So
Yeah,
I'm curious on your take on number. Let's start. Let's start with number 6. Let's say these people are in error. There is sin, and according to Christian doctrine, it affects us, our all of our faculties, all of our noetic faculties, and that includes our aesthetic values and judgments as well. Um, do you think this work? I think it works as an explanation, but like, what do you
yeah,
think?
yeah. Sure. Okay, maybe maybe the words like let's see the scene. Okay, let's say there is a truth to which is the most beautiful woman in the world, right? Or the most beautiful painting in the world. And the reason why 80% or the we call it the sin, uh, why 80% of the people got that wrong is because the faculties were affected by sin, right? So here's what happened. What you're saying, what happened is this: their sin make their brains perceive as beautiful or less beautiful, as more beautiful, something that was less beautiful, right? Or I don't know, or maybe their sin make them twisted their brains and make them perceive some. Let's say it made them perceive something as beautiful, which was actually not beautiful.
Mhm.
But here's the thing. Here's what I will say. First of all, so the property of being beautiful the way you explain it is basically that God looks at it and likes it or something like that. Let's say something
Values.
like that. But now I think we need a word to refer to the property of when a person that has their faculties messed up looks at it and likes it. And I would say now you need the word like beautiful, which is that he finds it beautiful, right? Even if God didn't find it beautiful. You know what I mean? What I
Mhm.
mean is like you need a word that is very what then would you call that thing what that has the property of being, yeah,
Well, he
yeah,
finds it so beautiful is just a word that represents, and again, there are other descriptive words we can use to describe aesthetically good stuff, but he's just saying, look, I find this aesthetically valuable.
yeah,
It's values, right? Does he value it or not? The serial killer, because of his sin corrupted faculties, values those decapitated heads, and by values, again, I'm talking aesthetically here.
yeah. Okay. No, I think it could work. I don't see anything like obviously. I don't see like an obvious defeater here
Yeah.
for that.
Again, and again, you could attack this on a factual level. Like, obviously, you as an atheist, you don't believe there was a fall or
Yeah, yeah,
that sin exists. So, like, it would resort to a debate on that factual level. Like, is
yeah,
it true? Are we corrupted by sin? Is there a fall and stuff? So, fair enough. But
yeah. So number five, God
yeah,
designed people on purpose to value things different. That sounds weird a bit because, for example, look at the example my poll, for example. 80, you're saying God designed it 80% of people to get this wrong, or 90%, and he designed only a small 10% to get that right. And that's weird. I mean, he must design almost everybody to get that wrong.
well, so okay, so here's the thing. So with number five, God couldn't design people to get something wrong. That would be an imperfection. He can't design people to get incorrect judgments. So number five wouldn't cover that, and that's perhaps a shortcoming, a limitation of it. But I would just use this as a potential partial explanation to say, remember, in situations where we have beautiful things. God values, remember the women, and he values the misty mountains. They're both beautiful, kind of thing, right? But in one case, one guy values the mountains bet over and above the women, kind of thing, and vice versa. So that number five would only cover situations like that. Saying broccoli or ice cream. You know, which do you value more? I can't imagine anyone valuing broccoli over ice cream, but there's someone out there, I bet.
Yeah.
So, so would you agree? I guess it works, but only as that partial. Do you agree that it works even in that limited sense?
Uh,
Maybe adjudicating what's the most beautiful and why people differ on that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm not sure I get what you're saying. Like ultimately, so you're saying what is more beautiful, right, from the paintings? The answer is an objective. Is there is one objective answer to that, which one God values the most, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so many people got that wrong, right? And you're saying
Yeah,
that the way they got that wrong, they value different because God designed it that way, right?
yeah. Okay, so I see what you're saying. Yeah, so in the case of making the contrastive judgment, these mountains are more beautiful than the painting of the women as an objective state. Yeah, if people differ, one's right, one's wrong. So I guess this would only work in the case that in the event that there's two things of equal value, like they're both equally well. Even there, you'd be wrong to say one's more beautiful than the other because they're equal. Okay, you're right on that one. So yeah, basically, this explanation only works unless it doesn't entail any incorrect values or judgments, kind of thing. So, all right,
Sure.
cool. All right, so let's go back to your subjectivism. Is there anything else about aesthetic
No, no, no,
disagreements?
no. I
No.
think so.
What
That's
if
subjective, is right? So
no
we were
aesthetic
on two.
refinement?
So
Go
I
ahead.
think we can look about three, right? Why is the refinement? I think yeah. Why is the refinement if it's a subjective thing? Because I do agree, like there is a difference between children and adults. Definitely, like a child may think that a picture of a dragon or a superhero is a beautiful one, but when they grow up, they like maybe they like other things. And people can also learn like about art, and
Yeah.
they can become more refined, more mature, right?
Yeah.
The people can get good taste. Why does that happen? I don't know. I mean, I will just have to say that, but I could simply say it doesn't matter. It's simply, if beautiness is a function in our brains, well, that somehow that function also changes over time. And will you say, I will simply deny that the adult is correct in an objective sense in a way that the child is not. I see, for the child this was beautiful, for the adult this was beautiful. And you will say here is, no, but the people, as people learn and become educated, they are getting closer to truth, they are getting
Mhm.
closer to what is actually beautiful.
Yeah.
But I guess I will have to deny that. I will say, no, maybe no, they're just changing, right? They think something is beautiful at one time, they think something else is beautiful at another time, but they always, I mean, that was all they were, both times that was true, right? It was beautiful to them, right?
Okay. Yeah. I think subjectivism has to deny this fact that there is actually any refinement and just go for it's all in the refinement aspect you're basically saying is an illusion. And
Hmm.
really all that's happening is just this equal or lateral change, right? From
Yeah,
superheroes to classical music or whatever. The only thing I would say about that is I think that introduces, first of all, it seems implausible and also ad hoc, right? You're
mm,
saying this, it's definitely an aspect of our experience. Humans believe they're not just changing, that they're maturing, they are developing.
yeah,
So you have to say that's just an illusion.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
would, where's that? That's just ad hoc. Where's that coming from? I guess would be my counter to that.
yeah. No, but you're right. It does kind of seem like one is not just changing, that one is maturing, right?
Yeah.
It does seem like that, right? So I will have to think about it maybe a little bit. Why?
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
sure.
Cool. Yeah. And next, so aesthetic object relevance, and I'm not. So I say it doesn't work because no, I think you agree with me that. Would you agree with me that objects are playing a causal role? Like now, I did my presentation in my master's on Dr. Malcolm Budd, who said like there's various opinions in the philosophy of aesthetics. What role does an object play? The properties of an object play, and I go for the most simplistic one that it plays a causal role. It causes the. Would you agree at least with that much that
Yeah,
you need an object to?
yeah, of course.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
but I
that
think your problem, yeah. I mean, the way I explained it in terms of functions, right? And a function needs a variable to work. A function in my brain needs to look at an x, and the x in this case will be the properties of the object, be like shape or color. So it will also be grounded in this x. But then the function, if which is my brain, my brain has a different function than your brain has, and then the function produces a y, which is a result. So because the x is also a part of that, the whole thing, then that accounts for why the object is also relevant to this.
okay, and what about my point? Just to make sure that it's not purely this, but the also again the object itself is beautiful. Like this is how just linguistically as an argument. Like, is there any reality to that, or is it no? If you take away the object, as long as I can stimulate your brain and create the same aesthetic, whatever it is, the experience, is that all that matters, or does it? You
If
know,
I mean, well, if you stimulate my brain and put an illusion of the object, right? Then I will say, well, that illusion is beautiful. I will no longer say that object is beautiful. I will say that the illusion is beautiful. But I'm like, yeah, I mean, so what? I don't see like what's the problem here exactly, right? It's not that
okay.
the object, we still need an object, right? The illusion will be the object. You know what I mean? It's not like the object disappears in that scenario, because you're saying you're stimulating my brain, but you have to stimulate it in a way that at least looks at an illusion of the object. Or are you saying that you stimulating my brain in a way that I only get the beautifulness feeling or something like that, without any visual stimuli?
Yeah, the latter is what I meant, kind of
Oh,
thing. But yeah, Even
Yeah, I don't see how this is possible, right? I don't think that such a stimuli is possible.
okay. So in the case of the illusion, then I hear what you're saying. Let me just try this because Philip Talon is a Christian apologist and scholar who's done a lot of work in the 24 arguments for God's existence with Alvin Plantinga. He tackled the argument for God from beauty, and he gives this argument from the destruction argument for the object relevance. And I just wanted to get your take on that. Basically, we have this temple or something like that, something beautiful, and let's say it's totally destroyed. And then we can recreate either an illusion, or let's say we do an actual recreation. There's actually something there. Right? We rebuild the temple to everything's the same. The measurements, the color, the properties, all the regular physical properties are the same. I would say there's a difference, aesthetic difference there. That the original temple is more beautiful than the other one. So yeah, what's your response to the destruction argument?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny because maybe it's some kind of psychological effect, but I do agree. Like, even if we can, like, if we destroy the temple or the Statue of Liberty, like, even if we can reconstruct the Statue of Liberty in a way that will be identical, right? It's identical, exactly, perfectly identical. There is something bad about the state of affairs that the original Statue of Liberty got destroyed. That's still a sad thing, right?
Mhm.
The replacement doesn't change. Like, there's still some value that has been lost, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's kind of why I argue the object is necessary, at least in a partial role, to ground these things, and it plays the role of causing the proper aesthetic subject, God, to respond in the proper way. So, all right, now, number 5, we both agree. Yeah, I mean, I kind of argued like you can't have evaluations don't exist as abstract objects. They exist as thoughts in minds of persons, of agents and stuff. So you
yeah.
need, in order to have evaluations, you need an evaluator. In order to have a value it's an experience. It's a feeling of significance, a qualia. What it feels like to value
Yeah,
something is
but
significant.
there is yeah, but there is an interesting question here. I think you also made it in the other video with those other guys. Like, imagine there is a world with no people and no observers and nobody, and there is a painting, right? That
Mhm.
is like the painting that I showed to you now. The question is that painting beautiful in that world? And it's just like, it's not. I'm not sure what to say, because, for example, I could say, well, the painting is such as that if an object would see it, it will be perceived as beautiful, and in that sense, it is beautiful. But if there is no, but I think this could be like missing the point somehow, because you're saying that, remember, in this world there is no observer, there will never be an observer or anything. So I'm not sure, like, if nobody is going to look at it, or in a world where nobody is going to look at the things, are the things really beautiful? I think probably not. I don't know.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Obviously, I gave it green status. That's part of the reason why I go for dispositional realism is that I think a subject is necessary, right? That you need the object plus the object's dispositional properties plus the conscious subject's values and their evaluational judgments, and this is what grounds it, right? So you need the subject who has the capability of having values and making judgments, and you need the object's dispositional properties, and combined, that's what allows you to go, yeah, this is beautiful, that and stuff like that, right? That's what grounds it, basically. Then, okay. Now, aesthetic non-deference. I'll just skip over number 6 for a second, but aesthetic non-deference, I give it a green check mark, and I think what I was thinking of here is just I questioned it during the presentation a bit, but I think at the time when I made this, I'm just saying, well, yeah, clearly under subjectivism, what's true for you, and it's true for him, so that you don't need to defer to anyone. You just stick with your opinion, and truth is relative, so that deference isn't really an issue. I think that's what I was thinking of here. I take it you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I get here's your utter failure here. The psychological correlation between aesthetic and moral value. Why on subjectivism? Why do humans correlate these values together?
Yeah, that's what I would say. I would say there is just some weird psychological effect, right? And there are a ton of those, right? That's all I would say. Like, I forgot. I wanted to look up to ask ChatGPT, show me some weird social studies that show some weird correlations, and I'm sure I would have been able to find it. Damn, it's too bad that I forgot to do it. But I'm sure there are many social studies or polls that are just weird. The people just do have do weird stuff sometimes. Have weird some uh,
Mhm.
some psychological tricks that just how people are. Sometimes they are not. Sometimes people are irrational. For example, that happens all the time. And for example, I didn't. By the way, I don't think that your correlations are super strong. Like one of them was when we are around ugly people, we are less inclined to be moral. I mean, it's like, I don't know, maybe that was some kind of weird psychological trick, or maybe there are men that want to impress a beautiful woman when they're in front of them. I don't know what happened exactly. One will have to look at the study, but I don't know what.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Fair. Okay. Fair enough. So it's just sort of random, sort of a glitch that just results in this
yeah, yeah,
correspondence.
yeah,
Um, Okay.
yeah.
The only thing I would say with that, if it is truly random, like what, why is this why is this a universal psychological trait? That, again, dozens of study. I only mentioned one, but
Okay.
there are literally dozens of studies which establish this correlation, and throughout history, humans have done this. I mean, we Thomas Aquinas. It's in the ancient Greeks. They make this equivalence or this correspondence. So it does seem even throughout history that human beings, there's something about us that does. So why is that a universal tendency? Like why isn't it like half the human race correlates them and the other half doesn't? Like if
Yeah,
it was just random, like I would expect there to be a mixed bag.
yeah, yeah. You're right. I mean, let's see, an object. But first of all, I think objects. I mean, this may be true when it comes to like beauty in people or something. One will have to look at the exact studies, for example. But one thing is beauty in objects. One another thing is beauty in people. And for example, beauty in objects, like I don't see how there could be a correlation there because objects cannot have moral, value. I don't think a stone can be moral or immoral, right?
Mhm.
So why I don't think moral properties. Objects cannot have moral properties, so they can have aesthetic properties, but not moral properties. So
Mhm.
how could there even be a relation, right? A correlation. You say it's a correlation, right? But I mean,
Mhm.
an object cannot possibly have moral properties, right? So I don't see how
Okay.
could this be like a real thing, you know?
Well, by way of, oh, sorry, were you going to say
No,
something?
no, no. That's
So believe it or not, I this when I came up with this argument, it changed. I would also give a moral theistic dispositional realism. So I would disagree with you. I think rocks and objects, uh, in certain events and stuff like that, right? So it's the things involved in certain events do have moral dispositional properties. It's the exact same thing. You require something, some kind of event involving things that have dispositional properties that would cause the moral subject to value that, that situation or something like that. So for example, a rock, if I use a rock to bash you in the head and kill you, um, the rock's properties are actually necessary, along with other things, right? Not just the rock, but um, together all the properties of that event, me using a rock to bash you in the head, um, those are necessary to cause me to, oh, is this a valuable experience, or is this is bad, I've just murdered one and stuff. So what's your thoughts on that? Because I
yeah,
think this dispositional realism applies to the moral world as well.
right. Yeah, I think a good example could be when people say guns are bad, right? We are
Yeah.
saying that objects, we're giving them a a moral property. We're saying guns are bad, right? Or
Yeah.
drugs, for example. These are objects, and yeah, we're saying these are bad, right?
Yeah.
That's an example of objects having these kind of properties.
Yeah.
Right?
The only difference, I guess, would be it's more in the moral case. There is a complication in that it's more sort of the properties of the event and the things involved in that event, I guess, that
Yeah.
we're judging. Whereas aesthetically, we can judge directly the rock and just by itself and stuff. Although you can, yeah, you can judge events as being beautiful, and it's not like, oh, the play, that's a series of events, and that was beautiful, or like that movie was beautiful, or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be the same thing. All right, all right. Well, that does it for my questioning your subjectivism. Is there anything else about subjectivism that we should cover, or do you want to look at
No,
my
I no,
covered it?
I think yeah.
Is there anything about my own notion of theistic dispositional realism you wanted to question me about, or do we cover it?
So yeah, well, yeah. Hold on, maybe. So there is a. So how exactly is seven explained by your theory? So what is seven exact? Seven is that we don't defer to people, right? They're to authorities, right?
Yeah. So the reason I gave it green, I was questioning it a little bit, but I remembered why it's solidly green is because the non-deference feature is that we don't defer to other human beings.
Right.
And theistic dispositional realism says that a non-human being, God, is the authority. So
Oh,
that's why it's green there. But if you include we don't defer to other aesthetic agents, then that would be sort of questionable because some people in their sin might say, "Well, I don't care what God values. I don't want to
yeah.
value that." But
I
the
think,
only thing
yeah.
with that is though I'm not sure that is a proven feature of the world, right? Like obviously atheists don't believe in God, but among people who do believe in God, do they say no? I know God exists and He's the perfect aesthetic judge, but no, I'm not going to agree with you. I'm going to think this is ugly. It's not a proven feature of the world.
But
Whereas reducing it to the human level, everybody agrees this is a fact of the world, right? I
right.
know for a fact, even speaking personally, that I don't care what the artsy fartsy types say. Picasso's garbage. Uh, you know what I mean? So yeah,
So yeah, no, I think well, but I think there is a point. Let's say if it actually happened, God comes and says, I think this the painting is the most. I think imagine you again. Then imagine the Picasso, right?
yeah,
I mean, try to imagine God comes and all things being equal, He doesn't change your taste or anything. God says, "Hey, I do find the Picasso super beautiful." Think really, really. Are you really going to think, oh, now I find it beautiful? I think no. I think you're going to still think, I still find it ugly, right? I think not even God could change that when you try to think about it in this way. What do you say?
okay, so I disagree, but I also agree, right? So because this is what I actually think is real. Like I think that I would change my evaluational judgment because God's right? So if God comes down and says, yeah, Picasso, and I actually, this is what I actually believe. I think I am wrong to say Picasso is garbage. Objectively, I think there is value. It probably is beautiful, and I just don't appreciate it. But God likes it, right? So He likes abstract art and classical art. Um, but so I would change my judgment and say, yeah, I'm wrong. But you're correct that I can't just switch my values. I would still
Yeah,
disvalue it on a qualia level. Like I wouldn't
no,
be like, oh, I actually feel this is beautiful. Now
that's right.
I can set myself up to change over time, perhaps, and with God's help, maybe He could repair the damage to where I do appreciate it. But just where I am right now, no, I can't just switch to going, yeah, I value Picasso. Whereas I can't with the evaluational judgment, the propositional judgment, yeah, I would change. I was mistaken. Picasso is beautiful, and I don't feel it, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, you can say the words, but it will be a lie, right? That's what I'm getting at. You will not suddenly see it as beautiful if you don't find it beautiful, even if God told you, No, I actually find it beautiful. That's what I'm getting at.
No, but remember theistic dispositional realism, not even the theistic version. It says the actual value. So I'd be telling the truth and saying
Oh,
it's beautiful, even if I don't feel it, because my values
oh,
are irrelevant. It's
okay,
grounded in
okay, yeah, that's right, that's right.
the proper agent, the proper aesthetic subject thing, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
in David Hume's case, he says that's the art experts. In theistic version, it's no, it's God. So
Okay,
yeah,
okay, sure, sure. Mm,
awesome, awesome. All
no,
right.
okay. Refinement. So yeah, okay, sure. I think that's fine. So there is, so where God finds some. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Perfect.
I mean, but how do six arrive from your hypothesis or from your explanation exactly? Like,
So if you remember, I quoted Genesis and how the ancient Hebrew, the creation, original creation was very good, and that involves moral and aesthetic aspects, right? So it was very good morally, and it was morally perfect, and it was also aesthetically good, aesthetically pleasing. It was a beautiful place, no death, no ugliness, and stuff like that. So everything in creation, these values are connected, and that sort of thing, and because of that, we were designed, right? What was originally, this is the way creation was supposed to be pre-fall. Everything that is good is beautiful, and vice versa. But because things get out of whack now because of the fall, sin has corrupted not just human beings and our values, but remember, if you take Genesis 3 literally, and I do, even though I think it's mytho history, I take the fall aspect where it says creation was cursed. All of creation is now out of whack in varying ways and stuff like that. So yeah, there are now ugly things in creation and stuff like that. Cancer is ugly. That's going against the design plan. The original design plan is what I define as being ugly and stuff like that, right? So, yeah, so that's how I explain it. Is that originally that requires Christian theism? I don't. If I wasn't assuming the Bible, if you're just a general theist arguing this argument, you'd need. I don't know what you'd do. You'd need to come up, with some other explanation. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, you'd need to come up with some other explanation as to why there's ugliness. You'd have the problem of ugliness to explain, right?
yeah,
But does that make sense? With my explanation, is just well, they were originally linked. It was just a fact of the world. Everything beautiful is good, and everything morally good is beautiful. And then that went out of whack with the fall. So that's why there are counter examples to it today.
okay. I just want to say another quick thing about something you mentioned about evolution, and you asked why do we find a tiger beautiful?
Mhm.
But the tiger is so dangerous, right?
Yeah.
But you are imagining watching a tiger on TV or seeing a tiger on the zoo. But what was going to happen naturally in a forest is that the tiger, the way actually I'm looking like the tiger, look orange and black, the tiger was going to be camouflaged by the trees and the woods that are brown or something like that. And because the tiger is like that, you were actually not going to notice the tiger, not going to see him, see it. You're in nature. That's what was actually going to happen. So we have to keep that in mind.
Okay. Okay. So you're saying like we evolved to see the tigers as beautiful in certain
No, yeah,
contexts.
I mean, I think I think the tiger evolved to be. I mean, in nature, what was going to happen is that we were actually not going to see the tiger well because he was going to be hidden and camouflaged, and just by some side effect, by a glitch, or there are things
Mm,
that are like side effects of evolution. They were not like the main purpose. By some side effect, we find it beautiful, right? But it's not like that was not really very important.
I see what you're saying. So yeah, like in our evolutionary past, the tiger the tiger was never seen as beautiful because he was always hidden in the
Yeah,
bushes
for example.
and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
like
for
that.
example. Yeah.
But for some other reason, so I would just say, I guess, if you go with that explanation, that is ad hoc, right? It's a non-evidenced assumption on your part, and I would just say, like, well, what were the precursors to finding tigers today in the context of being in zoos? Like, why are orange and black stripes beautiful to us on a cat? Like, what was the original precursors that contributed to our survival that led to that, where it's just a glitch today, but it had an evolutionary purpose back then, right? Like why
Yeah,
are orange, black, and white beautiful to us on a
yeah,
cat?
yeah. I don't know. I think in general that's what I was trying to get at with the image. I think in general we find complexity beautiful. So what I was trying to show with the first image, actually, the one of the nothingness and the one of the marble, is that we find complexity beautiful. I forgot to say that, but that was going to be my point. In general, complex things are like, yeah,
Okay. Again, I tend to agree with that, although I know for a fact there are others that no, they value simplicity over complexity, right? They like a little red dot on a white piece of paper. I'm like, okay. Okay. All right, so fair enough. Yeah. Anything else? I think I covered everything I wanted to do. You're good.
yeah. I think and nothing. Yeah, I think I covered also my points.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, great conversation. I hope I was really happy with how that went, and I think we did a thorough job evaluating each hypothesis, the pros and cons. So obviously, this was the reason I invited Juan or asked to do this show with him is because I really liked to. He did a short 11-minute video responding to another Christian, giving sort of the typical argument from beauty as an objective fact and stuff like that. And I thought it'd be cool to bring you on and do this discussion. So I hope you enjoyed it on your end.
Yeah. It was great. Thank you very much. Thank you for
Awesome.
having me. Okay.
No problem. And I'll just, I think there's one from Ringo Cat before he took off. He was saying, "Hi, Dale. Hope you're well. Back to the peacock feather fan that had to God as a couple wee scraggy feathers evolved over time. Just ain't going to cut it." Okay. So he was kind of agreeing with me that evolution wouldn't explain where that came from, I guess, right? Like, why did they evolve these from having just scraggy feathers that were ugly? Why would it evolve this beautiful thing? And I think he was kind of saying, especially in light of the fact that that would be costly from the perspective of natural selection, because he's going to be the first peacock to be killed. So, yeah, did you have anything you wanted to say on that front? Or
Yeah, I don't know what's the answer to that really. Yeah.
fair enough, fair enough. I'll give, yeah, all right. Yeah, I'll give you the answer Charles Darwin had for that is
Oh,
he said, well, that's why natural selection can't explain beauty. It's the null theory, basically, right? Or sexual selection. Beauty is this fundamental element in nature. It's an irreducible property that birds and other animals have, and it attracts sexual partners. So basically have the drive to survive through natural selection, and equally you have this sexual selection thing, and they're both, in some cases the sexual selection takes precedence even at the cost of survivability, and in other times it's vice versa. So that was how Charles Darwin answered it: is beauty is just this fundamental aspect in nature, kind of thing. And today it's known as the null theory by people like Richard Crum and stuff. So yeah. All right, cool. Well, that's it. I will stop sharing my screen, remove that. But yeah, thank you so much. And next week, what do I have? Guy Powell will be coming on to discuss his research on the Shroud of Turin from the art history argument. So he's actually done research on every single artistic representation of Jesus from the 500s up until the medieval period, and he's come up with some interesting findings, some things that don't necessarily comport with the traditional image of Edessa hypothesis. So we're going to have him on to give his presentation on what he's discovered from these paintings. Were they copied from the Shroud, or does the Shroud have nothing to do with these paintings, and that sort of thing? Or was the Shroud copied from the paintings? So find out, tune into that next week, and have a great week, everybody.
right.